Emily Carter returns to Maple Hollow after years away, only to find her father's cherished rocking chair tossed in a dumpster by the HOA. The train ride had lulled her into a quiet nostalgia as the familiar countryside rolled past her window. Framed in golden light and the beginnings of fall color, Emily Carter couldn't help but imagine the farmhouse, weathered but proud, waiting at the end of the road like it always had. She stepped off the bus at the tiny town square, suitcase in one hand, her coat catching the breeze that already hinted at crisp October air. The scent of apples and cinnamon floated from the Hollow Diner, where a chalkboard out front cheerfully announced apple butter pancakes back for harvest week. "Little Em," came a voice from the diner's open door. It was Bernice, the silver-haired waitress who had poured coffee for 3 generations of Carters. "Pumpkin pie, is that you?" Emily smiled, lips tightening with emotion she wasn't ready to unpack. "Hi, Bernice. Been a while?" "You grew up on me," the woman said, wiping her hands on her apron before offering a hug. "Your daddy's been counting the days." She gave a small nod and kept walking, though the warmth lingered. Past the corner drugstore, past the fire station, with the carved wooden eagle over its doors, toward the familiar gravel road that led to Carter Acres. Her boots crunched over early fallen leaves as the fields opened up around her. But something was wrong. The front porch, where her father had sat for hours every autumn with a radio and a mug of cider, was empty. No chair, no Thomas. She quickened her pace, suitcase forgotten by the mailbox. Inside the farmhouse, the scent of apple peels and newspaper ink greeted her. "In the kitchen," called her father's voice, scratchy from age but still steady. Thomas Carter sat by the window, peeling apples with calm rhythm, AM radio humming softly in the background. An old baseball game from the 70s, judging by the tone. He looked older than she remembered, thinner, but his eyes still sparked with the same quiet resolve. "Emily," he said with a smile that was both pride and apology, "I was beginning to think you weren't real anymore." She kissed his forehead and looked around, then out the window. "Where's the chair?" His hand paused mid-peel. "Gone." She blinked. "Gone?" He reached for a folded notice on the table. "Violation of HOA aesthetic code. Karen and her board said it didn't match the modern facade they're promoting." "That chair's been on that porch for 40 years, Emily said, her voice low. "I know," he said, returning to his apples, "but they don't." Something cracked open inside her. Without a word, she walked outside, down the path toward the newly paved cul-de-sac the HOA had installed over the old pasture. Her heels clicked against concrete where there once was dirt. Fences lined each yard like polite boundaries. Every house painted a muted taupe or beige, as if joy had been power-washed from the wood. The maintenance shed sat just behind the tennis courts, and there, discarded like a broken appliance, was her father's rocking chair, half covered in leaves, its right arm splintered, her jaw tightened. A laminated citation was tacked onto a post nearby. "Unapproved porch furniture, removed per code 7.3b. Her fingers curled into fists. "Well now," came a voice from behind her, smooth and saccharine. "Didn't expect to see you back so soon." Emily turned to see Karen Whitmore standing at the fence line, clipboard in hand, designer scarf fluttering slightly in the breeze. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "I see you found the chair," Karen added, almost apologetically. "It's such a shame, but we do have to maintain community standards. The board voted unanimously." Emily didn't respond. Karen looked past her toward the old farmhouse. "I suppose it's hard to let go of things from the past, but this neighborhood's changing. Progress, you know? Some people just can't keep up." The words hung in the air like the metallic scent of blood. Emily stepped closer. "You mean my father?" she said flatly. Karen offered a chuckle, almost pitying. "I mean, he's what? 70 now? Wheelchair bound? Maybe it's time to think about somewhere that better suits his condition." Emily stared at her for a long moment. Karen adjusted her scarf, perhaps unnerved by the silence. "My dad's not going anywhere, but you just might." Emily finds a letter slipped under the front door. Notice of intent to review parcel boundaries. The wind had carried a brittle chill overnight, the kind that made wood creak and leaves scatter like whispers. Morning light filtered through the old farmhouse windows in golden streaks, catching dust in the air, On the floor just inside the front door lay a letter, crisp and impersonal, as though it had never passed through human hands. Emily picked it up, brow furrowing at the envelope's printed label. It wasn't the usual HOA memo. This one bore the seal of the county zoning board. She broke the seal and unfolded the tri-folded page. Notice of intent to review parcel boundaries. Effective immediately. Her breath hitched. She read on, heart sinking with every bureaucratic word. There, in bold, was a parcel number. It matched Carter Acres. They were initiating a review of the property's lines, based on community development plans under preliminary HOA petition. She turned to where her father sat at the kitchen table, sipping hot cider, eyes scanning a newspaper. He pretended to read more than absorb. "You weren't kidding when you said they might accuse you of blocking the sidewalk with your chair," she said, holding up the letter. He gave a low chuckle. "Told you, I sit still too long and they'll redraw the map around me." Emily didn't laugh. She dropped her coat on the chair, letter in hand. Her mind already raced ahead, to legal implications, documents, filings, loopholes. Something didn't smell right. By early afternoon, she was driving the short distance to the county zoning office, the narrow roads winding through flame-colored trees. As she parked, the church bell in the square rang out 2 solemn notes. It was quieter than she remembered. Perhaps the town itself held its breath. The county building was dimly lit and faintly smelled of coffee and old carpet. A small sign read, "Property Records, Room 103. Inside, a woman with reading glasses perched on her nose and a sunflower mug half full of cold tea looked up. "Can I help you?" "I'm here about a notice sent to my father, Thomas Carter. Parcel review." Emily placed the letter on the desk. The clerk read it, then typed something slowly. "Yes. Looks like there's an active petition tied to your address, filed by, let's see, Maple Hollow HOA. Emily's jaw clenched. "Do you have the petition?" The woman hesitated, then retrieved a file folder from a cabinet. She laid it between them. Emily flipped it open. The title hit her like a slap. Proposed Extension of Community Green Space Initiative. Underneath, Carter parcel listed as Target Lot Number 4. Community Park East. She flipped pages until a printed signature caught her eye. Her blood went cold. Margaret J. Carter, her mother. Emily stared at the name. This is dated last year. My mother died 6 years ago." The clerk's expression shifted into discomfort. I don't know anything about that. It was submitted as a complete file. We assumed all signatures were verified." Emily forced herself to breathe. "Who submitted this?" The clerk tapped her pen. "It came through HOA Council, but the listed applicant is Karen Whitmore." Back at the farmhouse, dusk was setting in. Emily sat at the kitchen table, legal pads, printouts, and zoning maps strewn around her like fallen leaves. Thomas had made more cider, the scent curling through the house. She barely touched hers. She held up a printed map from the petition. The bold red line sliced diagonally through Carter Acres, carving out the orchard, the side field, even part of the barn. She stared at it, as if willing it to change. "This is a land grab," she muttered. Thomas, peeling another apple, didn't respond. He stared at the line too. Later that night, Emily's makeshift workspace was bathed in the soft yellow of a desk lamp. Through the window, smoke from backyard burn piles drifted past, and children's laughter echoed faintly as they sold caramel apples near the church steps. She scanned each petition page again. And then, something jumped out. Another name. Henry Temple. She knew Henry. He'd been a grumpy Vietnam vet who never left his porch, and he sure as hell didn't support any HOA initiative. She rummaged through old emails, scanned HOA minutes posted online, and finally found a scanned support letter attributed to Henry. His signature, dated, notarized. Her eyes narrowed. She rose and paced. They'd forged her mother's name. They'd faked Henry Temple's support. This wasn't zoning. This was theft wrapped in paperwork. She whispered aloud to the room, to no one but herself, and the steam curling from her untouched cider. "They're not just pushing boundaries, they're breaking laws." Emily walks into the HOA meeting in her sharp navy blazer, her voice calm, her binder full, her USB drive glowing faintly in her pocket. The community hall smelled faintly of burnt coffee and lemon-scented floor wax. Fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting a pale wash over the room where 30 or so folding chairs faced a collapsible table decked with nameplates. Most of the audience were retirees in beige windbreakers or cardigans, their expressions a mix of polite disinterest and thinly veiled frustration. At the front sat Karen Whitmore, posture perfect, smile strained. Emily Carter stepped into the room, heels muted against the linoleum. The conversations faltered slightly as heads turned. She moved with the kind of practiced confidence that came from years in courtrooms, though this was far more personal. "They won't listen to me, but they might just hear you," her father had said that morning, setting down his cider as he handed her the HOA schedule. Now, here she was. Karen glanced up, instantly stiffening at the sight of Emily's blazer and binder. Still, she smiled with her usual weaponized warmth. "Ms. Carter, what a surprise." Emily took an empty seat near the front, nodding without speaking. The meeting began with monotony, budget line items, sidewalk repainting, hedge height standards. But Emily waited, calm and still, until the familiar phrase finally came. "Any open concerns from residents before we adjourn?" Emily stood. Karen blinked. "You'd like to speak?" "I would." A murmur passed through the chairs. She walked to the front, plugged in her USB, and opened her binder without looking down. "My name is Emily Carter. I'm a licensed attorney and resident of Carter Acres, still under the legal parcel designation 14-092. I'd like to address a few inconsistencies in recent HOA filings." Karen's smile began to crack at the edges. Emily clicked to display a zoning map. "This," she said, "is a county-certified parcel outline from 1995. This," she advanced the slide, "is the one filed last month with the HOA's proposed green space expansion." Several heads leaned forward. "Note the difference. The new map includes acreage that legally belongs to my father. Not only was this land listed without owner consent, but documents submitted in support of the expansion include a forged signature from my deceased mother, dated years after her death." Gasps were audible. "I've filed a motion with the zoning office to formally suspend review pending investigation." Karen shifted in her chair, but Emily wasn't finished. "I'd also like to share a brief video." She tapped the keyboard. On the projector, the grainy image of Karen appeared, standing at the edge of Carter Acres, clipboard in hand. "Well, if he can't maintain the porch, maybe it's time he moves somewhere he belongs," Karen's voice echoed, dripping condescension. A quiet hush fell, then a low rumble of discomfort. Karen stood trying to laugh. "I'm sure that's out of context." "I have more," Emily said. "Much more, but I'll stop there." Board members exchanged glances. One leaned toward another, whispering. "I have only one question," Emily continued, turning to the board. "Is this the kind of leadership this community stands behind?" The room seemed to hold its breath. Karen scoffed, mask slipping. "He's a cripple who should have left years ago." Silence. Karen's eyes darted to the side, then realization dawned. Her mic, clipped neatly to her lapel, was still hot. The tiny red light blinked in accusation. Emily tilted her head slightly, voice smooth. "I think we all heard that, and so will the judge. A sheriff's deputy delivers a court summons to Emily. Karen is suing her for harassment and community defamation." The knock came just after noon, sharp and deliberate. Emily, mid-sentence in a phone call with a former zoning inspector, froze at the sound. Thomas, seated by the kitchen window, looked up from peeling apples. Outside, a county cruiser idled quietly in the driveway. She opened the door to find a tall, weathered deputy holding a clipboard. His tone was respectful, but the envelope he handed her was heavy in more ways than one. "Miss Carter, I'm here to serve you this summons. Civil suit, filed this morning." Emily accepted it without a word. The seal of the Maple Hollow Civil Court stared up at her like a dare. She skimmed the first page, allegations of defamation, malicious interference, and intentional disruption of community harmony. Karen's name was at the top. Thomas shifted his weight in his chair as she stepped back inside, eyes scanning the legalese. "She's suing me for harassment?" Emily said aloud. Thomas shook his head slowly. "Told you. Karen doesn't fight fair. She throws stones from behind paperwork." The courthouse sat at the edge of town like an aging guardian, all brick and cracked columns. Inside, under flickering ceiling fans, Emily stood in a preliminary hearing, surrounded by the weight of bureaucracy and forced civility. Karen arrived with a silk scarf, soft pearls, and an expression of wounded virtue. Her attorney, Mr. Givens, oozed charm and condescension, with a leather briefcase and an unnecessary bow tie. "My client," he said, gesturing to Karen, "has endured unjust accusations, digital defamation, and a deeply unsettling ambush at a public meeting. She's a pillar of this community." Emily kept her voice even. "My presentation was factual. The records I presented were obtained through county filings." Givens smirked. Yes, and your legal background, though impressive, doesn't grant you standing here. You haven't lived in Maple Hollow in over a decade." The judge, a thin woman with silver hair and reading glasses perched low, raised a hand. "This isn't a ruling. This is a hearing to establish scope. Let's stay focused." Outside the courthouse, the October breeze tugged at Emily's blazer. She exhaled slowly, eyes narrowing as she stepped off the stone steps. The battle had gone from whispers and fines to formal declarations. That evening, Thomas sat on the porch sipping cinnamon tea, a plaid blanket over his knees. The sun was sliding below the tree line, streaking the sky in burnt orange. Maple Hollow's annual autumn social was in full swing across the way. Twinkling lights dangled from the HOA clubhouse, laughter and clinking glasses echoing faintly. Emily stepped out, her mind still tangled in motions and hearing prep, when she saw her father's face shift. "What is that?" he asked. She followed his gaze to the barn. A glint of metal caught her eye. Nailed to the old wooden door was Caesar's leash, and beneath it, on a piece of torn cardboard, "You're next." Emily walked over slowly, heart pounding. She removed the leash, folded the note, and walked back inside without a word. She didn't tell her father what the note said. Later that night, she sat with files strewn across the dining table. She had requested publicly available HOA documents weeks ago, and today, a few expense reports had finally arrived. Most were banal: catering, lawn maintenance, holiday decorations. But 3 pages in, she spotted something odd. Under professional services, she found multiple payments to a private surveying firm, Ridge and Mark, LLC. Each entry noted as land use consultations. She looked it up. The firm had been defunct for over 4 years. She looked deeper, and there it was. The registered founder of Ridge and Mark, Karen Whitmore. She didn't even change the address. At the next court appearance, Emily filed a motion to subpoena full HOA financial records from the past 5 years. The judge read the motion carefully, lips pressed tight. Then, with a slow nod, she looked up. "Motion granted," Mr. Givens sputtered. "Your Honor, on what grounds?" "On grounds that allegations of fraudulent use of HOA funds and forged signatures warrant scrutiny," she said firmly. "You'll provide all requested documents within 10 business days." Outside the courthouse, Karen waited at the base of the steps like a statue placed on a chessboard. Emily passed without stopping. "You'll regret ever coming back here," Karen hissed, just low enough not to echo. Emily didn't look back. An anonymous envelope arrives on the Carter porch. HOA, internal emails, marked confidential. The envelope was plain, unsealed, and unmarked except for a faint smudge of something sticky near the flap. Emily found it tucked behind the morning paper, just beneath a flyer for the upcoming Harvest Fair. She paused on the steps, scanned the driveway, empty except for Thomas's pickup, and carried it inside. The kitchen had become her de facto war room. Legal pads, annotated maps, 2 open laptops, and a corkboard covered in string and pushpins filled every surface. The envelope barely made a sound as she opened it. Inside were printed emails, pages of them, between HOA board members and a name she didn't recognize at first. Carl Dempsey, listed as Acquisition Coordinator, Green Shores Realty. Every message was tagged confidential, internal use only. She read in silence. Subject: Carter parcel. Status: reply. Once rezoning completes, Green Shores will finalize offer. Carter holdout still resisting. Considering enforcement via HOA code stack. Another line: board to receive bonus payments post-sale. Details in private ledger. Emily set the pages down slowly. Her hands were steady, but her breath came short. They really were going to sell us off in pieces, she said to herself. In a small town, Thomas had said once, secrets don't stay buried. They rot through the floorboards. That afternoon, she met with someone at the Maple Hollow Diner, a quiet man with deep lines around his eyes and the kind of stiffness that comes from regret. He used to be the HOA treasurer, she remembered. He had called her using a burner number, said only, "I need to clear my conscience." They sat in a booth near the window. The smell of bacon grease and apple pie mingled with the hum of the jukebox. "I didn't know the whole picture," he muttered, stirring a cup of weak coffee. "Karen, she said it was for the good of the community, that we'd all benefit if Greenshores came in, clean things up, raise property values." "And the budget records?" Emily asked gently. "I cooked them," he admitted. "Under pressure, I marked the surveyor payouts as landscaping consultations. I signed off on travel reimbursements that never happened." "Why are you telling me this now?" He looked down. "Because I still live here, and because your father's a good man." That night, Emily filed a motion in court to immediately halt all HOA real estate transactions pending fraud investigation. Karen's response was swift and sharp. At the next HOA board gathering, she snapped at a fellow member mid-sentence, her voice high and brittle. "You think I didn't carry this place for 10 years? You think I'm the villain here?" She stormed out before the meeting even ended, her clipboard left behind. Back at Carter Acres, Thomas sat by the fire with Caesar curled at his feet. Emily entered, the court motion receipt in her hand. He looked up, the flames casting flickers across his weathered face. "You've done more in a month than I thought was possible," he said softly. "We're not done," Emily replied. The next morning, the courthouse posted the notice. Hearing date set. The presiding judge, Eleanor Graves. Emily blinked at the name. Judge Graves had been her constitutional law professor back in law school, stern, brilliant, and a fierce protector of civil and elder rights. Across town, in Karen's kitchen, the news landed like a stone in glass. She stood frozen in front of her lawyer, eyes locked on the notice. "Eleanor Graves?" she whispered. Her hands trembled as she reached for the counter. "We're not going to win." Mr. Givens looked uneasy. "We can still prepare." Karen cut him off. "Settle," she muttered. "We have to settle." The courtroom is packed. Locals, reporters, even HOA members sit silent as Emily delivers her opening statement. The air inside the courthouse held the weight of unspoken history. Wooden pews creaked under the shifting of bodies, but not a soul dared speak. The windows, tall and narrow, filtered in late autumn light that cast gold across the polished floor. The bailiff called for order, and Emily rose. She moved slowly to the center of the courtroom, her steps deliberate, her notes untouched. When she began to speak, her voice was low but clear, shaped more by purpose than performance. "For some people, this is just land, just boundary lines and property codes. But to us, it's home. This land raised more than crops," she said, locking eyes with the judge. "It raised people. It raised me." Thomas sat in the second row, upright in his wheelchair, his calloused hands folded in his lap. A dozen neighbors, people who had once avoided eye contact at HOA meetings, now leaned forward in quiet support. Judge Hamilton, stern and gray-haired, with a demeanor like a seasoned oak, nodded slightly. Emily laid out the proof, the forged petition signatures, the illegal rezoning maps, the sweetheart payouts from Greenshores Realty, the email threads that revealed collusion, and the treasurer's sworn testimony. She ended with the security footage of Karen's outburst, played again for the record. Karen sat pale and rigid beside her lawyer, who no longer met her gaze. The defense attempted rebuttal. Mr. Givens droned about technicalities and misunderstood intentions. But the judge was unmoved. Hours passed. Outside, the last leaves fluttered from the maples along the courthouse lawn. Inside, the tension had shifted from uncertain to inevitable. When the gavel came down, Judge Hamilton spoke with finality. "The HOA acted beyond its charter and will be held accountable. Effective immediately, the board president and all complicit members are ordered to resign. The Carter property is to be removed from HOA jurisdiction. Fines totaling $250,000 will be distributed into a township fund supporting landowner legal protections. Furthermore," she paused, glancing down at a final order, "per community petition, the vacated residence of former HOA President Karen Whitmore is to be redesignated as the Maple Hollow Transitional Shelter for Disabled Veterans. ownership assigned in honor of Mr. Thomas Carter. A hush filled the room, followed by the sound of soft applause that built until even the walls seemed to hum with it. Karen stood slowly, as if gravity had doubled. Her lawyer said nothing. No board members came to her side. As the bailiff approached, she muttered something inaudible and allowed herself to be led out a side door. Her heels clicked against the marble, fading like an old grievance finally let go. Outside, the town gathered on the courthouse steps. A local reporter held up a microphone, but Emily gently waved her off. She shook hands with the judge, then turned to find her father already heading toward the truck ramp. Back at Carter Acres, the house had a hush to it, but it no longer felt heavy. The sun had dipped behind the barn, casting amber streaks across the porch. A new rocking chair waited beside the old one, handcrafted by a neighbor who once fined them for a garden gnome. Emily poured 2 mugs of warm cider. She handed one to her father and sat down beside him. "We held the line, Dad." He didn't answer at first, just rocked gently, eyes on the orchard where leaves now littered the earth like confetti. Then he reached forward, running his fingers over the porch post. There, carved into the fresh wood by someone anonymous but knowing, were 7 words. "This land stands because we did." He read them aloud, voice steady. Emily smiled and leaned her head against the backrest, the last of the evening light catching in her hair. The wind stirred again, but this time it didn't shake anything loose. When a community nearly forgot what truly mattered, one daughter's quiet strength reminded them. The Carter family didn't just reclaim their land. They restored a sense of dignity that had been buried beneath rules and red tape. In standing up for her father, Emily showed that legacies aren't protected by walls or paperwork, but by courage, memory, and love. And sometimes, the strongest roots grow from a rocking chair on an old porch, where justice, like autumn leaves, finally finds its place to settle.